Welcome to the 44th in a series of shows focused on Brookline as an age-friendly community. In 2012, the World Health Organization designated Brookline its first age-friendly city in New England. Last year, the AARP also designated Brookline an age-friendly city. This was the work of the Select Board, the town departments, Brookline residents, and Brookline Can, an all-volunteer network that works on issues for Brookline residents of all ages. Today's guest is Sam Mintz. Sam is a journalist, but he's more than a journalist. He brought the Brookline news to Brookline. He brought local news back. And I'm looking forward to hearing from him. Sam is a career journalist. He worked in a number of different areas. He worked with local news, national news, Cape Cod Times to Politico. He's originally from Arlington, Massachusetts. He's back, we're glad to say, and he attended Brandeis University. Welcome, Sam. I want to say one thing before we start. I really am happy that you've brought news to Brookline. We felt like we were completely isolated for at least a couple of years since Brookline Tab went.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. And we'll talk about it later, but I have a lot of other people that should get credit for bringing this website and our organization to town. So,
absolutely. So, tell us something about what is Brookline News, basically.
We are a local news website. We're hyper local, so we only cover Brookline. We are nonprofit. That's our business model, which is sort of a increasingly popular business model for local news organizations trying to replace newspapers that have disappeared. We're a very small organization. I'm our only full-time employee at the moment, although we hope that will change in the near future. And we, are trying to the best of our and my ability to cover what's happening in Brookline. And we write about everything from town government to schools and education, businesses and arts, local sports, et cetera. And we've touched on all those things and more in our first, 7 months or so of operation. We launched back in May 23rd was when we started our website. We have a weekly newsletter, which we talk about later, which is sort of the primary way that we deliver news to people. And yeah, that's sort of us in a few seconds.
So a couple of things. I do want to, as we go through it, you to mention as much as possible also your interaction with our audience, which is older adults of all ages, but it's just where it makes a difference. Okay. The history, you brought that up a minute ago and mentioned it. I sort of vaguely get it. It's Ellen Clegg, who I think is a very well-known editor from the Globe. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so back in around the summer of 2022, which is now 2 years ago, I guess, now that we're in 24, a group of sort of coalition of people from across Brookline, several retired journalists, people in business, people who are interested in what was happening in town government, were frustrated because the Brookline Tab, which was the local newspaper here for a long time, had first, closed off its print weekly newspaper and then stopped publishing Brookline local news altogether. It had laid off or reassigned its last Brookline reporter. And so they thought, where can we get Brookline news? This is a big problem. The Brookline Patch is another example of an organization that, sort of does news in Brookline, but they're very limited in what they publish and the reporting they do. So this group, over, again, since
extremely limited.
Yes.
In their reporting as far as Brookline.
And I don't want to disparage another news organization, but it's minimal. It's a lot of what they do is republish press releases, essentially. And so this group basically decided, we need to change this. And so they started building support for a new local news organization in Brookline. They started raising money, very importantly. They started building a website building an email list, gauging ideas from the community about the best way to do this. And they had built up enough and raised enough money that in April of 2023, they were hiring an editor, and I had actually been introduced to them. I had been doing some volunteering. I was really interested in the project, just as someone who lives locally and who is a journalist and is worried about the future of local news. So I've been doing some volunteering. I did some freelance writing from that first, and then when they were hiring an editor, I applied, and that was how I got connected. And so we started with coverage of the May 2023 election. We wrote some newsletters in the weeks leading up to that about the Pierce School and other important issues that were on the ballot. And then we built from there as I got into.
Yeah, there isn't an article you have that isn't something that is not anyplace else and is not thoroughly covered. So I just want to say, but I don't even know what I'm asking, but what are your news sources? What does that even mean?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I don't think people necessarily have a good sense of what my job entails. I think they often will read the end product and it's sort of a black box of how did that story come to be and what's going on, within this organization, which is basically me within my day. So I get news from a ton of different places, and it's important to me to have a sort of diversity of sources, ideas that come from different places and stories that come from different places. A pretty fundamental one is that I watch as many local government meetings and boards and committees and commissions as I can. I cover town meeting, I cover the select board meetings, I cover a bunch of different, lesser commissions, and get all sorts of ideas from there about what's happening in town and what's important and what people care about and what might be controversial. I develop sources within the community. I get to know people. I've gotten to know people who have ideas about what we should write about. Many of those are people who work in town government, but others are involved in local business or local advocacy, et cetera. I keep a close eye on the internet, honestly, on social media. I'm sure you and many of your audience know about the Brookline Townwide Facebook group, which is not often the most healthy discourse, but people talk about things that they're interested about and care about, and I get ideas from there. I get ideas from the site formerly known as Twitter, now called X for some weird, confusing reason. So yeah, I'm constantly on the lookout in all these different ways for ideas. And people write to me sometimes, even people who are just readers, and that's actually some of maybe my favorite place to get a story idea is if someone writes in and says, "Hey, I've been wondering about this," or "Hey, I have a question about this," and if I'm able to answer that question and write an article about it and then send them to that and say, "Hey, I answered your question," that's a really great feeling, and I've been able to do that a couple of times so far. So I love that as well.
Yeah, that's great. It really is. Do you know how many subscribers you have at this moment? Do you have any idea?
Yes, we just yesterday passed the 5,000 subscriber threshold. And so to be clear, these are free subscriptions because all of our content on our site is always going to be free. That's very fundamental to sort of our mission and what we're doing. So that's people who subscribe to our email newsletters. And that's not necessarily the same number of people as read all of our stories, but that's how many people get our newsletters every Wednesday and whenever else we send it. So.
And you take donations, but there's no paywall.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I can get into now or later, maybe the business model too, and how we're trying to make money. Cause yeah, we, again, being free to read is fundamental to what we're doing.
Yeah. Before that, can we get an idea of what it actually looks like? Can you give us a look at Brookline.news?
Absolutely. So here is our website. You should be able to see it now.
Oh, I saw that article. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is our homepage. To start with, the way you can access this page is by going to your browser and typing in brookline.news. That's it. That's the URL, and that'll take you directly to this site. The stories that you'll see first are usually our most recent stories. So this is from January 2nd. Another one from the 1st. This is a very popular story here. About the movie American Fiction, a new movie in theaters.
Fascinating.
Shot largely in Brookline.
Yeah, I saw that. That was fascinating.
Yeah. Some emails from town meeting members, which we got through public records, a trial that I covered, some town politics. This is all kind of heavy stuff at the moment on our site, but we do try to keep a balance of heavy and light. So you can also sort by category. So you'll see here, if you mouse over the word news, you can see all these different categories. So if there's something you're particularly interested in, let's say education.
Yeah.
You can click and you'll see all of our recent stories about what's happening in the schools and education in Brookline. And so you can get every topic here. If you want to read letters to the editor, you can mouse over opinions, click letters to the editor, and read sort of what people have been writing into us about the stories we've been writing. We also encourage people to do that at the end of every article. Let me show you an example here. So I'm just clicking into an article. At the end of every article, you'll see a button that says, write a letter to the editor. And so that's for that specific article. And we just want to hear what people think about our stories. If people have feedback, ideas, comments, this is sort of our equivalent of a comment section, which we don't have because those are hard to moderate. And this is a sort of more controlled way of doing that.
Great.
Let me also just show you. So I mentioned before.
That's brave of you. That's really brave of you in Brookline.
To allow people to write in.
Yes. Brookline has a lot of opinions.
I love that about Brookline. It makes it fun. I mean, I always tell people that, compared to past jobs I've had, I think maybe my favorite part of this job is that people are so engaged with the work we're doing, even after only 6 months. And I hear feedback from so many people about what we're writing. And even if it's criticism or, saying, hey, I think you missed this, I'm just glad that people are reading my stories and have opinions on them. So I appreciate it being in a place that's opinionated. And I am myself, so I connect to it. But let me show the newsletter very quick, because that's one of the better ways to make sure you're getting all of our stories. We send out an email newsletter every Wednesday, and occasionally on other days of the week, if there's breaking news or other reasons that require an additional newsletter. And to access that, oh boy, now I have to find it. Oh, you'll see whatever page you're on our site, there's a big red button up in the top left that says subscribe to our newsletter. You'll click that, wait for it to load. You'll plug in your info here, first name, last name, and email. That's all we need from you. And the reality is, if you give us a fake first name, it's not a huge deal, because you're still getting our stuff.
I wish I knew that before.
And the one key thing to note here is that once you do this, you'll get an email asking you to confirm that you want to be on our list, and you'll have to click a button within that email. That's standard for some email newsletters, but not for others. And so you'll only get our newsletter once you've confirmed that, because we want to make sure that people are signing up and not signing other people up or using it for spam or whatever. Right. So yeah, anything else? Is there anything else I can show you on the site? That's sort of the main features. There's this donate button here, which I won't. I think you know what that does. That'll take you to a page where you can, if you want to contribute to us, that's how you can do that.
Absolutely. No, I think that's now. Is there any chance that there'll be a print? We have some people who are not high tech. I don't know how many that are not technically oriented. And I really don't know how many. I know of some, so I know that's true that they exist. Is there any chance there'll ever be a print edition or something?
The short answer is that
libraries or something.
Yeah, the short answer is that there is a chance that'll happen in the future, but it's not happening right now. The fundamental question for us is about finances, and that's something that we're in the process of still working on our first real budget that we're putting together. So a print edition would take money to produce, to print, and to distribute. It would take some of my time or someone else's time, and therefore, money to lay it out and to ensure that all the headlines are right and to do the editorial work involved with it. And so the question that we're trying to puzzle through is whether the return that we get from it, whether that's reaching new people or, ad revenue, specifically money coming in from selling ads in that print edition, would make up for, the costs. We're a very lean organization financially, sure. So we can't really afford to take any risks or to do anything that would have a significant negative impact on our bottom line. But we hear the demand for it, and so one of the things that we've talked about is potentially doing, you know, a sample or trial print edition that was maybe quarterly, maybe one that was ahead of big events like an election, et cetera, to sort of try it out and see how much it ended up costing us and what people got from it and whether we could make any money from ads. So that's one thing we've talked about doing, but it's a discussion that's in the works.
Great. I'd like to move to something that fascinates me. What is your job? How do you do that? Is one thing. And the other thing is there's a lot of many retired people around, some with information interests. Is there anything that you can get or we can contribute to your job?
Yeah, I mean, my job is a lot of different things. I do a million different things in a day, and I really enjoy that about my job. I report and write many, not all, of our articles. That's sort of fundamental. I'm an editor and a reporter at the moment. I'm doing a little bit of everything. I coordinate, photographers and freelance writers to do some of that other work that I'm not doing. I, help schedule and edit and, work with them. And many of them are young reporters who are in college or recent graduates. And so that's been great to feel like, I have a sort of mentorship role there as well with some of them. I communicate with members of the community about stories we should be doing, conversations like these, sort of spreading the word about who we are and what we're doing. And yeah, that's sort of the very basics of my job. As to your other question, we've struggled a bit with how to do. We've had a lot of people offer to volunteer their time or their work or their research or whatever it may be. And we've struggled a bit with how to respond to that, to be honest. Another one of the fundamental principles of when we were created was that we wanted our work to be done by professional journalists. The board and the founders wanted this organization to be run by professional journalists. And so that's part of why they've hired me. And it's part of why we work with freelancers who have some journalism experience and are, doing their work in the, as a journalist, sort of paid for their time. But we have heard from a lot of people, hey, we'd like to help. And, I don't have a journalism background. How can I pitch in? And I think the reality is that we want to find a way to bring those people in, but we're not sure the best way to do it. We're not taking op-eds or commentary at this point, although we hope to in the future once we have the resources to edit it and get it up there. So
watch out, it's Brookline.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Watch out, it's Brookline.
Yeah, I know. Well, so that's sort of a non-answer to your question, but I think right now the biggest thing that people can do to help and support us is to read our work, to share it with their friends and other people in town, to be part of our community, whether that's filing a letter to the editor in response to something we're writing, to get in touch with me with ideas about what we can do differently or stories that we should write. That's really helpful to us right now, and it's really enjoyable to me to be trying to build that audience and community.
Yeah, I had a couple of journalist questions, but I don't. A crazy thought, but what is news versus good news? You seem to be good at it, right? You've put some really interesting stuff out that is not necessarily horrible, things happening. And yet, of course, you're reporting on things that are important that happen. I don't even know if you can explain it, but I don't know how do you do that? Most of the majors and all of the other methods have come in, jump on the thing that's the loudest and, that attracts the most tension from the noise point of view.
Yeah.
You haven't done that, and it impresses me. For me, that's a really important sort of journalistic and ethical principle. And it's very much an active conversation in journalism as a field, right now and really ever since we moved to the internet from print, is about how you balance, what brings in money and what people want to click on versus what you feel are the most important stories to write. And, I'll give you a great example from just a few days ago, which is that actually, I probably shouldn't go into that example. I don't know if you can trim this out. It's a little too much confidential information. So, but the bottom line is, I think about this every day and all the time. The question of, are the things that we're writing productive and helpful? And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily stories that say this person did, a good thing in the community.
I'm committed to writing about everything that's happening in the community that feels important. And that includes things that are going wrong. It includes people who have done things that are bad, people who have committed crimes when it's appropriate for us to write about that. But, I think like everything, it's a balance. And I think people don't want to read all of one or the other. I think they want to read some stories about town government, some stories about business and art, some stories about things that are going poorly, some stories about things that are going well. And it's a sort of a constant, a constant fight, I guess, against that news instinct that's increasingly more popular to just jump on whatever is most sensational or scandalous or violent or, colorful.
So I'd like to move on just a little bit for a quick local news versus, because you've been in both, and versus things like the Globe or networks or streaming or podcasts. What's the difference, or how do you put that in perspective, the local news?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundamental difference, and maybe this is obvious, is the audience. We are writing for people who care about Brookline, who live in Brookline, who work in Brookline, and really for nobody else. And if people from outside of Brookline read our work, I hope that they will, and I hope that they'll find it interesting and they'll learn something about Brookline. But really, our primary audience is people who depend on Brookline for some aspect of their lives. That's sort of the fundamental difference between us and, say, the Boston Globe. The Globe writes about Brookline sometimes. They often, a lot of people have opinions about the Globe's coverage of Brookline, I know.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard a couple of our people have mentioned that.
Yeah, but the difference is that
it's changed also. There used to be more.
Yeah, absolutely. They used to have reporters who were assigned to cover suburbs like Brookline and Newton.
Well, they now cover Newton and further out.
Yep.
And Boston.
Yes.
Brookline disappears.
Yeah. But the difference when they do write about Brookline is that, they're writing for a regional audience, a much broader geographic area. So they, they'll come in for the big stories and then they leave. And I think the difference is that we plan to be around for all the stories. There have been several examples of this I can give. I think a really good one is, there was a fatal killing in Brookline in 2019 in Amory Park. A young man was stabbed and died, and every news outlet covered it, at the time, a little breathlessly. They were all over the scene. They were covering the charges, et cetera. And then the trial happened 4 years later, just, in December 2023, a few weeks ago when we're filming this. And I was there because I felt like it was an important Brookline story, and no other media covered it. And so that's sort of a great example of what I think we do differently. We will be there before, during, and after the big stories, and we'll find everything in between. It's just different from what anyone else covering Brookline is going to do.
I encourage people to read that, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. The other difference in my experience as a reporter for a local outlet here, and for national outlets, including Politico, which is sort of the most high-profile place I worked, the people that I talk to about stories and work with now are so passionate and engaged and interested and mad and really care about what I'm writing about, because it's, everything that's happening in their lives. It's what's happening in their backyards, at their schools, in their town, on their commute. It's just that extra level of sort of personal. And, when I worked at Politico, I was covering transportation policy. It was very in the weeds. It was, in some ways, had this status and stature where I was interviewing senators and cabinet secretaries and writing about these big national issues. But there was a level of distance from all of it that I felt, and maybe that meant I wasn't doing my job well enough there. But now in this job and in other local news jobs I've had, I just feel it feels important in a very different kind of way, a way that's more personal, and to me, honestly, a lot more fun to have that kind of reader base and sources.
Given that, what is the local news? What is your role as far as things that are happening globally and nationally?
That's a great question. And something that I think about a lot. We constantly are asked, like, are you going to write about this latest Supreme Court decision or this latest national election? One great example has been the war in Israel. We've written a number of stories about what's happening in Israel and in Gaza, and there are reverberations in Brookline, and there are all sorts, because Brookline has a large Jewish population, a large Israeli population relative to other places in Massachusetts. So it's being felt really intensely here. And I think, I think the challenge is to write about that in a way that's really centered in what's local, what's happening here, what people here care about and want to hear about, and to really try to, as much as possible, not get into the sort of impossible level of rancor and discourse that dominates the sort of national conversation. I mean, I can't imagine trying to write coherent stories about more broadly nationally about what's happening in Israel. And in some ways that makes it easy because, what's happening in Brookline is a little more distinct and coherent, although still very sort of emotional and charged and complex and difficult.
So we're running low on time. Are there any particular issues that we should be looking for going forward? I mean, I know things change instantly, but that you might point us to keep an eye on?
Yeah, well, for one, there's an election coming in May. We will be covering that very closely, the town election in May. We'll have all sorts of information about how people can register, who the candidates are, what their platforms they're running on, what the issues are, what seats are open. That's one very important thing. And I really hope people will pay attention to that. I think that, however involved you are in local government and civics, there's always another level you can go up. And I think that it benefits everyone when more people are involved. We also, this is aspirational, but in 2024, we hope to do more coverage about sort of broad systemic issues in Brookline, about things like income inequality, racial inequality, hunger and food insecurity. Obviously, housing will always be a large issue in Brookline, housing inequality and various housing issues. So we hope to, we've touched on all of those in our stories so far, but we really hope to expand our work to sort of help people understand what's happening in their town beyond a surface level.
Yeah, that's great. That's going to be a very big election. Actually, it looks like there's a lot of competition, and there's some big positions that are being filled.
Yeah, I'm a local politics.
Yeah, in the background you have, which is not your term, but they're looking at the charter and the way things work. But so who's going to be in there when that stuff happens? It's probably pretty important.
Yeah, I'm a local politics junkie, so I really love covering local campaigns. It's a lot of fun, and the cool thing about it in a town like Brookline is that no one else is covering this stuff. So we're sort of the go-to place, I think, to get this information, and I hope people will use us for that and benefit from it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. There's no one else. I've looked around. There's lots of coverage for their own interests, and it's fine. The town has a website with events, and other places have other things. Events, how do we send events to you if we have them?
Yes, great question. I can show my screen again because we have our events calendar. 1 second. So, first of all, to see our events calendar, you just scroll to the top of our site here and click events. You can see the calendar here. These links will all go to the websites of the sponsors of these events. To submit an event, just got to move myself here. You click post an event over here on the right, and then there's a form. Well, actually,
I love the search.
Yes, that's great too. You'll have to register as an event submitter, and you can do that here. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to go through and fill out this form with title, time, category, venue, a photo, and a link to the event. And that can be a little tricky. So if you need help with that, feel free to email me or use our contact form, and I can walk you through it. Can I just give one more shout out while we're looking at the website here?
Sure.
I just want to shout out our steering committee and board, who I think I mentioned them sort of vaguely before, but just by name, because these people are the ones who sort of made this all happen. They're working with me and with the site on a really daily basis to help us do what we do. So they're what makes me feel not alone. I'm the only full-time employee, but I'm working with them so much, and I truly couldn't do this without them, and none of this would be here without Ellen Clegg, Julie Rafferty, Iris Adler, Fred Perry, Colette Phillips, and Irene Segi. And they all have different expertises and different things they're good at and know how to do. So they are really vital to what we're doing.
Oh yeah, thanks. I'm glad you thought. I think we're running out of time, so I'd like to thank you. Obviously, you're available anytime you want to come on for a reason you're welcome. So I want to thank you. Be aware that everybody should be aware that program might show up in the next few weeks more than just this time. But again, it's available on Brookline CAM website, and it'll be available also in the Facebook and the thing formerly known as Twitter accounts for Brookline CAM. X. I own a Tesla. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for watching. Take care and be safe.